Hey everyone, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. My name is Aaron Freeman. I'm of FalcFans.com. I'm here with my co-host Scott Karasik, Pro Football Spot Draft Expert. We are back this week to talk about the 5-0 Atlanta Falcons and their Week 5 overtime win over the Washington Redskins. We will be previewing the Week 6 game against the New Orleans Saints on Thursday Night Football. And then, of course, as usual, we will be answering all of your excellent mailbag questions at the end of tonight's show. All right, Scott, we don't have a guest this week, but that's no big deal. It's just you and me, so I guess anybody's watching right now is, get used to it. It's just back to the old tried and true method of Scott and Aaron disagreeing on everything. Let's see if we can find some stuff to agree on this week. So let's talk about this Redskin game. Falcons did not sort of, I don't know if you would say it's a letdown game after that big win against Houston. They came back down to earth a little bit. Had a little bit of struggles with the Redskins. I've heard people compare it a lot to that 2012 Raiders game, which the Falcons played a pretty weak Raiders team and then kind of pulled off a win out of their butt, so to speak, with a pick six from Asante Samuel. We saw something similar on Sunday with Robert Alford getting that pick six in overtime. I wouldn't say we pulled the win out of our butt, but it certainly wasn't the prettiest outcome, I guess, through the first three quarters of the game. So what were your thoughts on what we saw on Sunday?
The first three quarters of the game, they were pretty awful. That being said, I'm very happy with how the fourth quarter looked and how the running game got together, how, Robert Alford as a player, outside of that bullshit pass interference call, he looked so good out there. He looked so good, and they were testing him all day. Kirk Cousins sucks, by the way. He has no good ball placement. But Alford was, making plays on the bad thrown balls. Those balls were literally caught to where only the receiver could touch it normally. And Alford was still at least there, even though he was like, man, this pass is awful.
Yeah, I got to agree. I think, I find it interesting. There's still people that are very, very anti-Robert Alford in our fan base. I don't quite get it. I thought he was one of the few good players on our defense last year, even though he didn't always play like that week in and week out. But, he was one of the positives, I thought, from last year. And I think he's picked up and played outstanding football these last 2 weeks against Houston and Washington. Made a couple of big plays. Yeah, he has some, pass interference. And I think Garcon had that big catch on his side of the field in the fourth quarter on that last drive. But, he's not Desmond Trufant. And I think we've talked about it on this show. I think it's unfairly, I think a lot of the anti-Alford backlash is people sort of expect him to be as good as Desmond Trufant, and he's not. Desmond Trufant's, in the conversation for being the best cornerback in the league.
There's three other corners that are as good as Desmond Trufant.
Yeah, at minimum, Desmond Trufant is the fourth or fifth best cornerback. That's if you're lowballing Desmond Trufant. But you can make a good case right now that he's the best cornerback in the league. And, I think people sort of think Robert Alford should be that guy. And when he's not, they're like, oh, he's terrible. He gets beat all the time. It's corners get beat. Desmond Trufant gets beat. It's not a lot, but he gets beat from time to time. And I just, I don't really get the Alford hate. I think he's a solid football player. I think he's probably one of the top 25 corners in the league. I don't even think he's really reached his peak. So
it's better than that. I'd say he's in the top 20.
Yeah, look, yeah, yeah, okay, well, yeah, I can't really argue with you on that. So, I was lowballing it, I guess, by saying 25. But at the end of the day, I still think, if you have two definite corners, there's only maybe three or four other teams that could say we have two top 20 corners on their roster, and I think people need to lay off of Robert Alford. He makes plays, he gives up some plays, but as long as you're making it's like Dante Robinson. Dante Robinson didn't make plays. He gave up a bunch of plays, but he didn't make plays. So it's like, what are you getting? You're not getting anything. Alford makes plays at least, and he gives up a lot less plays than Dante Robinson did.
He gives up a lot less plays than he did last year. I think he has maybe 2 plays this year where I'm like, oh, he really screwed up. And one of them he was going against Odell Beckham. So I'm like, okay, well, that's fair. Like, it's Odell Beckham. And then the other one he was going against, that was in the Dallas game. And then it was a run fit more than like an actual pass.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
It was a run fit on his side. Julius Randle, that big run to the left, I was like, oh, he screwed up his run fit. Great. But those were the 2 bad plays that I'm like really holding against Alford after film study. And even then, I'm like, I'm kind of being a little overbearing on him. But like Odell Beckham and then a run play, like that's what I'm mad about with Robert Alford. That's really not much.
Yeah. That would be a first quarter for Dante Robinson.
Yeah. Now, Trufant, on the other hand, he's made like 1 bad run fit all year. And he's had like a play where I'm like, oh, he shouldn't have let that guy catch the ball. But it was an 8-yard out on 3rd and 12. So I was like, all right, well, whatever. He could have knocked it away, but he didn't. But he pushed the guy out of bounds right after he caught it. So I was like, yeah, whatever. He did his job.
Yeah. I don't get sort of like, I think what it is people were very anti-Alford this preseason and at the beginning of the season or after the Giants game. And basically they just don't want to, say, oh, I was wrong about Robert Alford. They're just going to be like, no, well, he's playing better, but he's still not very good. I don't think that. It's like, it's just whatever. Like, what does he have to do to prove, but it is what it is. But speaking of guys that I thought played well against the Redskins, let's talk about Devontae Freeman. 3rd week in a row where Devontae Freeman has pretty much, I wouldn't say carried the offense because he got a lot of help from Julio in that Dallas game, but the last 2 weeks, I would say he's probably been the MVP of the offense.
You know what they say about, you get 1 time, it's a possible fluke. 2 times could be luck. 3 times, nah, it's more than either one. And 3 weeks in a row, he's put up over 100 yards of offense. He's put up at least a touchdown. Yeah, he had the fumble last week. It happens. A lot of people are saying that he had a fumble in the Houston game. He did not have a fumble in the Houston game. He was already down for like 3 full seconds, and as he was getting up, Wilfork knocked the ball out of his hand because that's what Vince Wilfork does. But I feel like people are underrating his receiving ability. Like, yeah, he can run for 140 yards in a game, but he can also go out there and catch the ball for 45, 50 yards easily on 5 catches.
Mm-hmm. I like the fact that he's not just
back. As an all-around back, he's on pace to do something that only 8 other players have done in NFL history. Or it's only happened 8 other times. It's 5 other players. One of those guys was Marshall Faulk, who did it 4 years in a row, from his 2nd year to his 5th year. If Devontae Freeman puts up those, 1,200 yards rushing, 700 yards receiving, like Marshall Faulk did those 4 years in a row, and does it these 4 years, Atlanta's offense will be unstoppable. Especially since that's the offense, that's the option that you were talking about. Oh, who's gonna spell Julio? Who's gonna take the pressure off Julio? Devontae Freeman. I think Devontae Freeman's gonna take the pressure off Julio. Because he was running against a lot of 8-man boxes against Washington. And that's why he didn't break a big run. His longest run was like 18 yards. And he had so many chances for longer had he just broken that one tackle or that one spot or made that one cut to get around that one guy who happened to be in the box that play. because they were doubling Julio and then putting 8 in the box, and they were like, all right, no one else can beat us. Because it was the truth. No one else can beat the Falcons or can beat defenses on the Falcons. So I'm really, really, really hoping that Freeman continues to get the ball the way he's been getting it. He gets better as the game goes on. The last 3 weeks, he's averaging a ridiculous yards per carry, too, because he won't quit. So 153.
Yeah, I like what Freeman is. You talked about him not getting those, really long runs, but it's like, if you can get 8-10 yards a pop like he was doing consistently against Washington, then, I don't need the 30-yard run. I don't need the 40-yard run, especially with some of the, given some of the issues with our passing game that showed on Sunday, what we need is a sustainer as opposed to that sort of home run hitter that Anton Smith was, or what we think Tevin Coleman could be once he's fully healthy again. Freeman has been that guy, and every offense needs that. With a guy who you can, first and 10, is going to get you 5, 6, 7 yards and get you into a manageable second down, where now you're not in a situation where it's 2nd and 8 or 2nd and 9, like it was a lot of times with Steven Jackson and Michael Turner towards the end of his career, where you're in an obvious passing down, or where, you're behind the 8 ball, or as they say, behind schedule on your offense. And, I think particularly in these upcoming weeks, especially if Julio's, a little more nicked up than what we've been led to believe, then, we're definitely going to need a running back like Devontae Freeman, who you can hand the ball off 25, 30 times and get a consistent level of offense each and every time and get 120, get 150 yards. I think what he's done in these last 3 games has really been impressive. I certainly, anybody probably goes back and listens and watches any of these shows that we did in the spring, I wasn't a big believer in Devontae Freeman. I thought he'd probably be our top running back, but he wouldn't be the sort of guy that could be a feature back or a workhorse. And right now, these last 3 weeks, he's definitely been that. So kudos to him. And I hope he keeps it up, and I'll be rooting for him, and I'll definitely claim him as my cousin for the remainder of the season as long as he keeps doing it.
He didn't even have to continue doing like the 150-yard games.
Pretty much, yeah.
As long as he gives the Falcons like 80 yards and 80 yards on the ground and like 30 yards through the air, he's giving them way more than they were expecting.
Absolutely. Now, another guy that I talked a lot about this offseason, I talked him up, and he finally showed up this week because he's been pretty quiet up till now, which was Jacob Tamme. He made a big impact. One of the things I noticed when I was scouting the Redskins last week was how poorly they had done against tight ends. They even let Jared Cook beat him a couple of times, and even though I'm a fan of Jared Cook, he's probably the most inconsistent starting tight end in the NFL. And everybody's favorite almost Falcon, Lance Kendricks, had a couple of big plays against him when the Rams played him a couple of weeks ago. So I was really expecting Tamme to step up and really have an impact in this game, and I thought he did. Obviously, he was our leading receiver, almost had 100 yards receiving. Really helped move the chains and really helped compensate for what was somewhat lost with injuries to Julio and injuries to Hankerson, sort of limiting what we had on the outside. So hopefully he can keep this up. Obviously, I'm not going to expect him to have, 94, 95 yards every week. But if he can be a reliable outlet for Matt Ryan, help take pressure off of Julio and Devontae and everybody else on the offense to make plays.
I mean, this past week I was like, oh, hey, Jacob Tamme, he's healthy. Let's hope he plays and does well. He's the one guy who I was like, oh, maybe he can get open. Maybe this play, Jacob Tamme, that 4th and 2, I was like, oh, hopefully they throw it to Tamme, because I had lost faith in Julio. I lost faith in Julio this week because he was so injured.
Yeah. So let's talk about Julio's injury. I think it was one of those things. that became a little bit more clear to watch the tape of the Texans game that he wasn't as healthy as we were led to believe. But I was hoping with all the talk of his practicing and, him looking sharp on Friday and looking sharp in warm-ups on Sunday morning, it was like, okay, well, maybe he's recovered. But it was very clear once we got into the actual game that he was very injured. And he cut it through it. Kudos to Julio. He's as tough as nails. No one can doubt that. But it was very clear that he was not, separating as well as he did. He was his breaks. He wasn't getting as much separation out of his breaks. He wasn't able to, that first overthrow to Matt Ryan had maybe the interception. I can't remember specifically. That it was a high throw by Matt Ryan, but normally Julio would have just gone up and plucked that out of the air. But I think because he doesn't have as much explosiveness in his lower body with the toe and hamstring injuries, that was an overthrow that led to an interception. So what are your thoughts on what Julio's status and how does that sort of play out against the Redskins in the upcoming games?
Going off my gut, I would say Julio either doesn't play or plays very limited snaps versus the Saints. He needs to sit a week just to get healthy. I mean, sometimes you just have to have a guy do that. Let him sit, let him ice it up, let him get excited. I know he'll want to get in that game, though. It's the Saints. But I feel like whenever the Falcons play the Saints, there's always someone that no one's expecting. Not a single person anyone's expecting that goes off. Like Harry Douglas goes off against the Saints. Or, Hankerson will go off against the Saints. Or maybe Roddy White will have his comeback game against the Saints. And people will go, oh, damn, what happened to Roddy White? Roddy White just put up 140 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Saints. So
that would be interesting, especially given he'll likely be facing Keenan Lewis, who has done a pretty good job of containing him the last 2 seasons. So we'll see what that happens. But yeah, I'm with you, Scott. I do think it wouldn't shock me if we get to Thursday's game and, Adam Schefter or Josina Anderson or somebody like that tweets out like a couple hours before the game starts, oh, yeah, Julio's going to be inactive tonight. That wouldn't shock me. And I certainly wouldn't complain about it because I agree with you. I think he needs some rest. The time off, getting him almost a full 2 weeks of rest should help a lot. And I think it's similar to what we had at the beginning of 2013 with Roddy, him trying to force him trying to gut it out with that high ankle sprain. And it really hurt him later on in the season, particularly when Julio went down and he was basically out for another month. We need Julio down the stretch. We need Julio for the playoffs. So I don't want to see him pushing himself a little too hard right now. Especially, we're 5-0. We're playing the Saints. It's a short week. Just chill out. I would love to see him play, but if it's at the cost of him aggravating an issue or getting more hurt or delaying his recovery time, then it's not worth it for me.
I agree.
Okay, Scott. So were there any other standouts or players that didn't stand out to you from this Redskin game that you wanted to touch on before we jump full head into this Saints game?
There was probably 3 bad plays on the defense that I just saw it and I was like, God damn it. There was a screenplay that Warlow missed the tackle. There was that was basically having me go, all right, well, the Falcons need to find someone better than Warlow, which you and I both know that's rare.
Saying a lot right there.
Yeah. Perspective. I like Warlow, but at this point in time, he's the weakest link on the defense, which says a lot about how good the defense is. And then there's the Matt Jones pass for 17 yards that I didn't like. And then when they drove down for a touchdown, I hated the play that wound up being the actual touchdown pass. Because it was 3rd and goal, and I was like, oh, hey, they should have this. and then they rushed 3.
Mm-hmm.
So conservative nature on some of the third downs drove me nuts. I understand why they did it, because Kirk Cousins is horrible against 8-man coverages, because it worked like 5 or 6 times later on. However, it's still tough to see. And then turnovers from Matt Ryan. The fumble, the 2 interceptions, those are unacceptable. Those are literally the only reason why Washington stayed in the game. Because if he doesn't throw that pick, if he doesn't throw the second pick, or if he doesn't fumble the ball, they may not have capitalized on those, but it gave them momentum. Like, I think they only got 3 points on the 3 turnovers they had, but they still gained momentum. And that's what matters.
Yeah, and it took points off of our scoreboard. Man, that's the main thing. Yeah, I think the defense, I think you just pointed out one of the positives about the defense is the fact that we turned the ball over 3 times and they only got 3 points out of it. So that's a testament to the defense and also probably testament to Kirk Cousins. But the one concern I had about the defense was how easily they gave up points in the fourth quarter once we had taken a lead. And so that was a little concerning to me, especially because we thought those days were over, where that happened every single week last year, where it was like, 2-minute drill, the other team is going to go down the field and score, whether it's a field goal or whether it's a touchdown, guaranteed. And we hadn't seen that really at all this year. And then we saw it against the Redskins, against Kirk Cousins of all people. That was a little surprising to me. Obviously, I do think that's probably more of a 1-week sort of aberration as opposed to something that's going to be a trend. But, it was a little shocking to see that happen this past week, especially, in the Georgia Dome against Kirk Cousins. If that was Cam Newton or something in Carolina, I could see that. But against the competition we faced,
they ran such soft coverage, and Carrier was like a half step from not getting knocked out of bounds, and Garcon, he was going against William Moore, who Moore is not anywhere close to what he used to be, if we're being honest. Like, I'm almost at a point watching Moore, I'd be perfectly happy seeing the Falcons bench him for Kamal Ishmael.
I wouldn't go that far, but I can see where you're coming from.
Put someone else in there. I mean, he's missing plays. He's taking bad angles. He's not looking good in coverage.
I still don't trust Ishmael coverage. He was to blame on that one touchdown or that pass interference that Phillip Adams had against Houston late in the game. Completely was
talking about the Houston end of game.
Yeah.
The garbage time.
Yeah, no, man, I'm not going to let that go.
Garbage time, man.
I'm not letting it go. It's because now you're putting that same dude in not garbage time. And if you can't do okay in garbage time, like that play, you go back and he's playing single high. And once again, Kamal Ishmael is the worst single high safety in probably the entire NFL. And it was horrible.
He was in single high. He shouldn't be in single high. They never put Willie Moe in single high.
Sometimes Willie Moe does play zone, though. And when he
plays the underneath robber zone, and whenever Ishmael plays that same zone, he looks better.
If you don't have the instincts to play, single high is the easiest thing to do. Don't let the guy get behind you. It's not that hard. If you can't do that, then to me, you can't do anything in coverage.
Well, let's put it this way. Terezi has looked good back there, and Allen's looked good back there, to where they shouldn't have to put Ishmael back there.
That would be your hope, but I still don't trust Kamal Ishmael in coverage. That's what I'll say. Willie Moe has to get a lot worse for me to jump on we might bench him for Kamal Ishmael of all people. All right. So there was our first disagreement, folks. Welcome back to the old Falcon Central radio show. All right, Scott, let's talk about these Saints. Now, Obviously, the Falcons are 5-0. The Saints are 1-5, thanks to C.J. Spiller pulling a play out of his butt, or 1-4. I'm sorry. Um, Obviously, this is not normally how we've seen this matchup, where one team is on top and one team is on the bottom, and when we have seen that, it's been sort of the reverse. But do you feel like this is still going to be the same old sort of Saints-Falcon games that we've seen in the past? It's going to be pretty close, pretty competitive because it's a divisional game, even though the Falcons probably are clearly the better team, at least when we're at 100%? Or do you feel like, oh no, this is a new era of the Falcons, and Dan Quinn's just going to steamroll these Saints and do something that Mike Smith never did?
Well, I thought Dan Quinn was going to steamroll the foreskins, but that's not exactly what happened now, is it?
No.
Maybe it's just an NFC East. Teams are tougher than I thought they were, because when you go back and you look at them and you take out the Falcons' 4 wins against them, you got three teams that are 2-2 and one team that's 3-1. So maybe I underestimated the NFC East, but this Saints team is arguably the worst team in the league. Like, arguably the worst team in the league. They lost to a Buccaneers team that's terrible. They lost to, they're bad. They're not even competitive against. I'm looking at this team and I'm like, how did they beat the Cowboys
Randomly.
outside of like luck and playing Brandon Weeden? Like, if the Cowboys had either Tony Romo or Des Bryant, they would have gotten destroyed.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I watched the Eagles game from last weekend, and that game could have easily been like 50-something. They could have put a 50 burger on him, because Bradford threw 2 end zone picks. He threw 2 interceptions in the end zone that took 14 points off the board, and the Eagles still scored 39 points against them. So it was really pathetic. But like at the same time, I'm like, I can't imagine the Saints being that bad again 2 weeks in a row. They're a bad team, but I kind of feel like, okay, that's probably their lowest point of the season. And they law of averages, they'll probably come up a little bit and make this more of a competitive game. But boy, I would love to see the Falcons just crush them. That would feel so good, Just put a hurt on them, beat them like a couple of beatings we took, like 45-17 sort of beatdowns. I would love to see that.
You know the game that kind of stands out? Day after Christmas, 2011. Atlanta lost 45-16.
Yeah.
And the entire time I'm sitting there thinking, I really hate the Saints. And then they run up the score just so Drew Brees can get the record. The passing yards in a season record. That kind of grinds my gears.
Yeah, that game. Like, I never really was one of those people that was like, oh, I can't stand the Saints. Like, I didn't like them, but it wasn't like, I lived to hate the Saints. But that game really sort of put the passion and the fire in me to really dislike the Saints.
Like, yeah. Fuck the Saints.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come out and say it. Fuck the Saints. I hope Atlanta wins 70-0 every time we play them. I'm not going to disagree with you there. I'm just not going to predict that either.
Yeah.
Because Atlanta and the Saints always seem to play close. If I had to pick a score, I think the Falcons win probably 35-28. Now, if they can get the defense going, if they can get the interior line to create sacks and actual pressure instead of, I don't know what the hell they've been doing in the past, but like just a bunch of hits. If they can turn those hits into sacks, or if they can somehow repeat what they did at the end of last year with better players, I would love it. That 5 sacks against Drew Brees and like 6 hits on top of it, and basically said, you know what, Drew, you're done. We hate you. We're going to beat the living crap out of you. When we saw Rashid Hageman ragdoll Jari Evans, I want to see that at least 3 times.
Yeah.
I want to see Adrian Claiborne and Vic Beasley hit that twist 2-3 times. I want to see Drew Brees take some shots. I don't want to see him get hurt. I don't want to see him get injured. I just want him to feel like his body is aching from all the punishment that the Falcons defensive line gives him. That's what I want. I want him to get hit so hard that he starts throwing it to Falcons defenders just so he doesn't have to get hit again.
I would like to see that too, Scott. When we get pressure on Brees, we win those games. So.
And the Falcons' run defense is really good. Despite what the yards per carry average suggests, if you take out those 3 runs against Dallas, where the Dallas offensive line basically held the Falcons defenders, you're looking at a run defense that averages less than the already low 3.9 yard average they're allowing. It's closer to 3.4 yards per carry. And over the last, I think, 2 games, they haven't allowed more than 2.2 yards per carry.
Yeah, I think our run defense is really good. When you look at the numbers, it doesn't look good. I remember getting into a Twitter argument with a Redskins fan last week about, he was like, y'all's run defense is terrible. And I'm like, our run defense is actually good, but, the numbers suggest that it's, closer to average or below average. But you're right. I think our run defense, outside of a couple of big plays they gave up to Dallas early, that first half against Dallas, I think it put the clamps on pretty much every running game we've seen. So.
Yeah, when you add in garbage time versus Houston, 3.2 yards a carry that game. When you add in this past week, 51 divided by 4, they allowed 2.1 yards per carry. And that's including a 9-yard run to Chris Thompson that was basically towards the end of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not worried about the Saints run offense. Mark Ingram does not concern me whatsoever. Kyrie Robinson is decent, but I'm not really worried about him pulling a Chris Ivory on us this week or anything like that. So, the one issue to me is not those running backs, but it's C.J. Spiller. Like, he's the only thing, him and Cooks are the only 2 things on the Saints offense that give me some concern. Cooks has not been very good this year, but when he lines up in the slot, which he hasn't done a ton of, but he's done a decent amount. I think he's lined up 20, 25% of the time. Like, his speed does give me some concern, especially if the Falcons go back to the tried and true, let's put Phillip Adams in the slot as opposed to let's put Alfred in the slot. I lost a lot of faith with Jalen Collins last week against the Texans, so I don't really want to see him out there. If we put Alfred in the slot against Cooks, I still think, not to write off Collins completely for his career or anything, but I would rather not see him again until 2016 if I had my choice. But, yeah, Spiller, we've had troubles with these fast running backs this year, and Spiller's another one of those guys. So those are the only 2 things about the Saints that give me a little worry that they could hurt us with that. But, I think our pass rush will be able to mitigate some of those issues.
I just hope, really, really hope that Atlanta continually pushes them into 3rd and long situations. Because that would really, really, really make the Falcons have the upper hand. On defense all day. This is the one year where I'm like, this pass rush is better than anybody gives it credit for. It's way better than anybody gives it credit for. They've already got 33 quarterback sacks or hits. 33 in 5 games. Last year, it wasn't until game 7 or 8 that they were even close to crossing the 25 marker. There was no pass rush on the Falcons last year. There's a lot of pass rush on the Falcons this year. They're on pace to surpass their sack marks and their hit marks from last year, especially since they're going against a lot weaker offensive lines in the games coming up. They don't have to deal with Philadelphia. They don't have to deal with Dallas. They don't have to deal with Washington. Houston had a very solid offensive line, and they still allowed 6 hits. Atlanta's hitting quarterbacks. They're just not sacking them. Eventually, those hits turn into sacks as the year goes on, as you start playing weaker offensive lines. And when you've got New Orleans, Tennessee, Tampa Bay, San Francisco all coming up, if Atlanta continues to push teams into these passing situations where they're forcing them to go out of their normal game, Atlanta forces teams to pass over 2/3 of the time.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you like getting teams one-dimensional. And, you know, if we can pin our ears back, we've seen that in some of these games when guys have been able to really pin their ears back and not have to worry about dealing with the run. We've seen guys like Beasley and Claiborne and Babineau and Schofield really get pressure on the quarterbacks. And that's really it, you know. Like in the past, we were always the team that was worried about, oh no, if we get behind and the other team gets to pin their ears back and attack our offensive line, it's game over. But now the shoe is on the other foot, and now we're that team that when we get with these fourth quarter leads, we can really start to turn up the heat and do some things. Like I haven't been as impressed with the pass rush. I certainly think it's better than it was last year, light years better, but I still feel like they haven't really made that leap to become a unit that is feared. But I do think, as you mentioned, a lot of that might have to do with who they're facing these early weeks. And I think as we face some softer offensive lines and as, you know, guys like Beasley improve over the course of the season, you know, he's not going to hit the ground running completely in his first 5 games. I do feel like by year's end, we may be in a position where we are one of the more feared pass rushers in the NFL.
I just ran the numbers. 67% of the time, teams are passing against the Falcons. 32.8% of the time, teams are rushing. So when you break that down, that's an average of, say there's 70 plays in a game. I'm 67%. They're passing the ball 45 plus times against Atlanta.
It's good. That usually means they're playing from behind.
And that's probably why the Falcons' pass defense in terms of volume yardage is towards the bottom. But if you look at yards per attempt, they're top 10.
That's what they think. Yeah.
They allow top 10 least amount of touchdowns, top 6 in interceptions, top 8 in quarterback rating allowed. I mean, they allow a lot of yards. It's empty calories. This is literally a defense that allows those empty calories that Mike Nolan used to talk about.
Yeah. The passer rating is an important one because that one correlates a lot to winning games. So when you have a top 10, you know, when we were in 2012, I think we were like top 5 or top 6 or something like that in passer rating allowed. You know, a lot of that has to do with you might give up yards, but you don't give up a lot of touchdowns, and you create a lot of turnovers on the back end. And that's what you want to do as a pass defense. You don't want to give up points, obviously. And if you can create turnovers, that gives you opportunities on offense because league-wide, the average points scored per turnover, I think, is about 3.5. So that's one of the reasons why people say the turnover battle is important because if you get one more turnover than the other team, then that's 3.5 points on average that you're going to score than the other team. So obviously that makes a difference because, you know, as Trent Dilfer might say, you know, the team that scores the most points usually wins the game. You can't win games if you don't, whatever he said. I can't remember what he said, but it was terrible. So
the team that scores the most points wins the game.
He said something ridiculous. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something that was like the most obvious thing.
His thing is the team that gets the most turnovers wins games, which is pretty common. The only time the Falcons have lost the turnover battle all year was this past week. The only time they've lost it all year. So when you go through the games and you're like, all right, well, that's the only time they've lost it. That makes sense. You know, the other time that they didn't win the turnover battle was against the Eagles. So basically, if the Falcons are plus whatever in the turnover battle, they'll win the game. They'll have a decisive victory, or at least a fun-to-watch victory like the New York game. I think New York wins the East. I think they were unlucky week 1.
You'd say they were kind of unlucky week 2, too.
Yeah, same thing. They lost both those games last minute over – the Dallas game was a terrible pass interference call. And I think that was Vinovic's crew that week, too. The same crew that made the horrible pass interference call in Atlanta. And
against Atlanta, Eli missed a wide open wide receiver in the end zone on that play that Croy stripped him.
It was Vinovic's crew. I just went and looked it up. Vinovic's crew in week 1 almost screwed the Giants out of a win. And this past week almost screwed the Falcons out of a win. Because they don't understand what pass interference is. And yeah, Croy Bierman's finally stood up. Croy Bierman's playing a lot less snaps than he has in the past. So when you limit his snaps, he looks better.
There you go.
Remember when this offseason when you and I were saying, you know what? I don't really mind Bierman as long as he's not starting.
Yeah, I remember that.
And you said the same thing. Yeah, just don't start him. Play him 30% of the snaps. He's playing about 30% of the snaps.
Yeah, Bierman's always been at his best when he's had his best seasons, when he's been in small doses. When you can, play him 25, 30 snaps, whatever, and you pick the spots, you choose the spots where you want to play him. Or you want him to play, run defense on defensive end, he can do that. You want him to, give John Abraham a breather as a pass rusher, he could do that. But when when you're playing them 70 snaps or whatever, and then you're diluting the sample, as they say, in the steroid business.
You're basically taking a player who shouldn't be on the field for more than those 40% of the snaps. Well, what's a good example? Chocolate. Chocolate's a great example.
Okay. Curious where this goes.
Chocolate is amazing until you get to like that 30th piece.
The 30th, okay. Okay.
And then you're like, I've had way too much chocolate. My stomach's hurting. That's Croy Bierman. Get him those 30 snaps, but once he gets past that, you're like, no, dude, you're starting to screw up.
All right. I don't know if I've made it to 30. I think I might have made it to like 10.
All right, so you make it to 10. Sorry, I'm a fat ass. All right.
No. All right. 30th piece of chocolate. Okay. Wow. All right.
I'm sorry that I was that kid growing up that ate like half his Halloween candy on Halloween.
The Halloween, I would probably get to 30. Yeah, you're probably right. That's fair enough.
We were like, oh my God, all this candy.
Yeah. Gotta eat the chocolate first. So, Scott, let's talk about some of these injuries. Now, the Saints are pretty beat up. They got a bunch of injuries on their offensive line. Evans is supposed to play this week. He's missed the last 3 games. Lolito, the other guard, I don't think he's practiced at all this week, so that doesn't sound like he's going to play, but you never know. Obviously, the Falcons have their own injuries. We're supposed to get Durant back. Person's not going to play, so James Stone is going to start, your boy, James Stone.
I don't mind that. I really don't. He looked good this past week.
I thought so too. I thought he did some good things.
When Person was having trouble early in the year, I was saying, "Hey, let's put James Stone in. Person can't snap." So I'm okay with that. I think Person and Stone are probably even in terms of raw natural talent, but Stone is a better athlete, like overall athlete, stronger football player, like stronger person, like stronger athlete, where Person's more of that football player. He's got it more up here. Although I think line calls are being called by Chester anyway, because when Person went out and Stone came in, literally no difference in the line calls. Like I didn't see a damn thing different in the communication up front on the line calls. So either Ryan's calling them or Chester's calling them. Because everybody still knew what the hell to do. And it was like taking out one cog, putting in another cog that was just fresher and didn't have an injury. I think they'll be fine with Stone. I'd be more worried if Levitri or if Chester go out.
Yeah, I think you're right because I was the last person on the James Stone's not that bad as a guard bandwagon, but I am going to jump off of that. I think he's fine as a center, but when he's been pushed into the situations at guard, it's been overwhelmingly bad. I think he's done a couple of good things, but not enough to sort of think that.
You there, Aaron? All right. I think Aaron kind of timed out because I have not seen anything from him for a couple seconds. I was giving him a couple seconds. Give me 1 second. We do have some. Looks like we're having some issues. All right, looking through this, he's got Evans questionable with a knee, likely will play. Evans is pretty shitty. Got thrown around by Rashid Hageman. Armstead, questionable knee, practiced on Tuesday. Armstead's going against Vic Beasley. He's their left tackle. That's not going to be a fun night for the Saints if Evans and Armstead are both hurt. Lito's also hurt, hasn't been playing. They're banged up on the offensive line in a game that they can't be banged up on the offensive line. Lewis and Bird both hurt. Might be Lewis's first game back. And then Damian Swan, who's not any good in the first place, is having some issues. Give me 1 second. I'm going to communicate with Aaron. And then there is a question of Devontae Freeman against Stephon Anthony. Stephon Anthony is an excellent football player. I'm kind of jealous that they got him and that the Falcons didn't. I was hoping he would fall to the Falcons' second-round pick so that they could have Durant and Anthony and then Reed as the linebackers. But it seemed like they were okay with Warlow in the middle. So can't really get that angry about it. Aaron's jumping back out and back in for a second, so we're gonna try and figure this out. Thank you for forgiving my rants. Hey, Aaron, you're back.
All right, there we go.
I knew it was your end.
All right.
All right, so I kind of just ran down the injuries, basically called the Saints offensive line crap. Said if Teron Armstead has a questionable knee injury, that it's probably not a good thing going against Vic Beasley, who's got more speed than, well, anybody that they can put in front of him. But especially a guy with a knee injury, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
And then Evans probably going to get ragdolled a little bit. And then Lolito, who's not really that good in the first place, is probably going to get ragdolled a little bit. So it really just kind of comes down to how good Unger really is and how good Andrews Pete and Zach Streif are, because they're going to see a lot of playing time.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think Unger is really the only good offensive lineman they had. I think Streif is okay. I think Armstead, is good, but obviously, as you said, his injuries issues. But I'm really sort of looking forward to the Lolito Claiborne matchup because you're right, Lolito's terrible, and I think this is sort of the game where has Claiborne had a sack? He just had a bunch of hits, right?
I think he's had one sack.
Okay.
But
But
he's had one sack. The sacks for the Falcons, there's 6 of them. Beasley has 2, Stupar has 1, Bierman has 1, Hageman has 1, and Claiborne has 1.
okay. Well, I know he's gotten a bunch of pressures and a bunch of hits, and I wasn't sure if he had gotten a sack. But I do think this week is going to be the week where if he hadn't got one, he'd definitely get one against Lolito because he's not good.
Oh, yeah. He's had 6 quarterback hits, and Schofield's had 4. So I think Schofield will get his first sack, and I think basically that Claiborne, Beasley, Schofield, Babineau line is pretty gangster. You got 3 sacks and like 14 quarterback hits on it right now, just in that group. So that's the big thing that Dan Quinn changed is he packaged up his groups and said, hey, this is our pass rush package. This is our run defense package.
Yeah. And it's been great, other than maybe that Eagles game where the tempo sort of limited their substitutions. It's been every week, and I think it will continue to be so. Put your 4 best run defenders out there with Hageman, Soliai, and Jackson, and then you can basically throw in either Bierman or Goodman because they're both, fine playing a run at that Leo spot. Goodman I thought struggled in the preseason playing that Leo spot, but he's been solid in the regular season. So I guess he was saving it all for the regular season.
Or he was working on things in preseason.
Yeah, that's another reason why sometimes we put a little too much stock in the preseason. I won't lie. Sometimes I do it. I think part of it was probably because of what happened last year, where it was like, oh, the Falcons are 0-4 in the preseason. It doesn't matter. It's preseason. And the terribleness that happened in the season. So, but obviously that wasn't the case this year. So,
I will say your boy Stupar probably deserves to start at weak side linebacker until Durant comes back. And if Durant ends up that elbow injury super serious, he has to have season-ending surgery, just put Stupar in full-time as weak side linebacker. And that way, if they have to shift, they don't even have to switch sides. Just have one play right side, one play left, and Reed or Stupar can drop back into coverage.
it's not a bad idea. Yeah. All right, Scott, you want to get into these mailbag questions?
Yep.
All right, our first one comes from Smorgasbord9. Will we finally see Hardy play on Thursday? Wide receiver depth is concerning with Julio and Hank hurting.
I hope to God they bring him up and let him play. I mean, it's about damn time he got in a game.
Yeah.
With if Julio's out, he's definitely playing. But I could see a situation where Hankerson doesn't play. And you need somebody out there. And Hardy is good enough to where maybe he's not great in the offense, but he's someone he's more of a gamer. He's more of someone who says, you throw him out there, you put him in the game, he's going to perform better than he normally does.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't see – I think there's a good chance. I won't say it's definite because you never know. But I feel like with Julio and Hankerson being nicked up and really with how poorly Roddy has been this entire season, I know I know there is still a lot of Falcon fans that still feel like Roddy is, that Roddy of old is ready to come back. I'm officially off that bandwagon. When you look at how unproductive he's been this year, especially last week when we really needed him with Julio being out a lot. If Julio's nicked up now, we really need him to step up this week. But he might be facing Keenan Lewis, who I think in 4 games is held him to 6 catches in 4 games. So it's like one of those things where like that, a good game for Roddy against Keenan Lewis is 2 catches. So it's one of those things where I feel like if this is the week, Roddy has to step up this week, or else I don't see why the Falcons will continue to play him as a starter. Why not give Hankerson that job? Why not give Hardy that shot? Because you're not getting anything from having Roddy in that role. So I really do feel like if Hardy doesn't play, then Roddy better have like 5 or 6 catches or 8 catches or whatever. And if he doesn't, then he probably just needs to be on the bench for the rest of the season.
Well, and if you look at who they had inactive last week and you use it as kind of a template for this week, there's going to be 2 offensive linemen, Justin Durant. So basically Person, Durant, and Bryce Harris are all pretty much guaranteed out. Then you've got Malachi Goodman, so maybe a defensive lineman or an edge who's going to be sitting out, or even a linebacker. Maybe Bartu's out and they bring Goodman in. You're going to be down 2, like a cornerback and a safety, because they only keep 4 active on game days. Or you could see a situation where, they say, hey, we don't need Teron Ward active, or we don't need Robinson Teresi, so we'll have Charles Godfrey active. Or, maybe Adams gets hurt in practice, or someone gets hurt in practice at corner like Adams or Collins, and Southward plays. But that's like the only way those 2 are going to get back in the game, is if someone gets hurt. So you're probably looking at Southward, Godfrey, Durant, Person, and Harris. So the only real question is whether it's Goodman or the 3rd tight end, like Tony Moyaki, is benched. And then Justin Hardy versus Leonard Hankerson. Because I feel like everybody else has a clear, defined, clean role on the team. Paul Soliai, Brooks Reed, O'Brien Schofield, Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman. There's nobody here that I see outside of maybe Tony Moyaki who you would sit for Justin Hardy. Like that's
Lolo, but yeah.
Well, even Toilolo. Toilolo may not be great at really anything, but the coaching staff and Ryan seem to trust him enough to where he's going to get playing time.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying Toilolo's bad. I think what you get from Moyaki, as a run blocker is worth, if I'm choosing between Toilolo or Moyaki, I like Moyaki's run blocking more so than I like really of anything that Toilolo brings to the table, even though I think Toilolo does bring some things in. All right. Next question. We have Crandall McCrary at RiseUp0802. If you were Dan Quinn, would you sit Julio this week and give him 2 weeks to heal his hammy?
Yes, I would definitely do that. Let him heal up, let him sit, and let him get healthy. And if you got to inject his hamstring with cortisone or whatever the hell you can inject it with to help bring some of the swelling down, if there's any swelling or if there's anything you can do to help him heal, do it.
All right. I'm with you on that, Scott. I ditto. Yeah. We need Julio in December and January, not necessarily in October.
Yeah.
All right. Next question is from @DirtyBirds. With the injuries slowly starting to pile up for ATL, how do you see the Falcons without key starters?
I'm not seeing slowly piling up. You got Julio, you got Person, you got Durant, who could all miss this week. Hankerson could miss this week. I don't see Freeman missing. I really don't honestly see Julio missing. Well, so basically it's Person and Durant who are pretty much guaranteed to miss this week. That's 2 starters, 1 on each side of the ball. That's relatively healthy. I mean, if you're missing 5, 6, 7, 8 starters like they were back in 13, it's different. But right now, completely different situation. I think they'll be fine without those 2 guys. I think they've got enough depth between Stupar and James Stone to be fine, which I would not have said this last year at all. But Chris Morgan has the offensive line looking good, and Stupar is playing out of his friggin' skull. So bring him in, let him play. What's the worst you can do?
Well, I think obviously the team is different if Julio's out. Obviously, I think the main difference there is basically earlier this season, no one played cover 1 against us because they knew that was just a guaranteed 40-yard pass to Julio. And I think if you don't have him on the field and he's not Julio, then you'll see a lot more teams playing more cover 1 and throwing 8 guys in the box to stop the run and stop Devontae. And I don't really see Roddy or Hankerson at this point being that type of guy that can take the top off and win that one-on-one matchups. Maybe Hankerson, but I don't know if he's as reliable as that to really put the fear of God in defenses. So that's probably the main issue right now. Obviously, Durant is our best linebacker, so losing him, you lose a lot. But I do feel like we can somewhat compensate for him because I don't feel like he's so good that it's like you can't handle that. Like, so I mean, I feel like we're good right now. I think we have, I thought Threezy did a pretty good job. Free safety was one of the positions I was probably most concerned at with the depth going into the season. But I thought he did a good enough job that I'm not overly concerned. So really, Julio is the only injury that really scares me. And obviously, if Freeman was to miss time, I'd be concerned. But I do feel like Coleman is ready to sort of pick up where he left off if that were to happen. So not a big deal with the injuries. Okay, we have Ikaika Hall. He asks, in your opinion, which Falcon defense would you take and why? 2012s or 2015s?
2015. There's more than one good pass rusher on 2015's defense. The run defense in 2015 is way better than anything we saw in 2012. In 2012, they had no idea how to do run fits. The only cool thing about 2012's defense was all the different amoeba schemes and all the bullshit Mike Nolan fed us about all that. But the Falcons had arguably the worst run defense in the league that year. The only reason why teams didn't just continually run the ball down Atlanta's throat is because they were consistently playing from behind. Now, the run defense is good, and the Falcons are playing from in front, so it makes it even tougher on teams. So, better pass rush, way better corners. Don't get me wrong, Asante Samuel was good, but he still got burnt. Brent Grimes was good, but he was out after the first game. And Dante Robinson fucking sucked. The only thing I miss is a competent nickel corner because I don't feel like Phillip Adams is really that good.
Yeah, I think you're right. You kind of have to lean 2015 largely because of the run defense. I do feel like, though, I do think Asante was pretty good. I do feel like our safeties. I think Willie Moe was obviously better than he is now because he was a Pro Bowler back then. Obviously, we had Abraham and Babineau back then. Spoon, probably wasn't his best season, but he was still a good player. So I don't feel like there's a huge gap between the two defenses. If you just go player position by position, I would love to have John Abraham. If I had to pick one player from either team's defense, I'd probably choose John Abraham before he got hurt in 2012. But yeah, you gotta have to go with 2015's defense if you had to choose between those two. All right. Now we have one from Cardo32. Do the Falcons have the next two-headed monster in the backfield?
I wouldn't say that. I like that. He's not the same vision that Devontae Freeman has. Freeman's built for the scheme. And I've been saying it ever since the Falcons drafted him, that when Freeman's in, you got to play zone plays. And this year I kept saying Freeman's probably a better back for the scheme, should be the main back, and Coleman be the secondary back. Because you just get Coleman that little bit of a hole, he can break it off for 40 yards, 50 yards, because he's that fast. So I don't think it'll be the next two-headed monster in the way that a lot of people were expecting. But as long as they continue to get Freeman that 15 to 20 carries and 5 catches every game, and then use Coleman in as more of a spell back than anything else, I think they'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah, I do feel like Coleman's going to have a couple more big games in him before the season is up. Probably the weeks where, the typical 130, 150-yard game that we've grown so accustomed to over the last 3 weeks. But, I feel like we have a good group of running backs. I don't know if I would say it's quite reached its peak. I do feel like Coleman's going to only continue to get better as the years progress. So I feel like we'll be looking back on this 2015 running back group and we'll be like, oh, yeah, this is not as good as our 2016 or 2017 group. So I do feel like there's still a lot of upside with these guys, but I feel confident that they'll eventually grow into, one of the better running combos in the league as we get forward, if Freeman can keep this up and if Coleman lives up to his potential. All right.
I will say with the Falcons running the ball 45% of the time, I would be perfectly okay if they did end up having them as a two-headed monster, because they could probably lead the league in rushing in terms of total yardage. Atlanta runs the ball more than any other team in the league. 31 times a game.
There you go. That's classic Kyle Shanahan, because I think the Browns were like number 2 last year, even though they were always behind in games.
Well, and the thing is, they're still like top 15 in passing attempts. They just run a lot of plays. They also hold on to the ball 35 minutes a game, which is another reason why the defense is so much better than it was last year. It's so much easier to cover a guy for 25 minutes of game time than for 35 minutes of game time.
Yeah, I think that's part of the strategy. So we got another question from about the running backs from Evan Birchfield. I feel like Evan asks a variation of this question every week. He asked, Coleman only had 2 carries. It seemed this would be a 50-50 running back situation. Is it clearly Freeman's now?
I mean, yeah, Freeman's the prime back until he loses it. And with how he's been running, I don't see any way he really loses it as long as Shanahan's here. He is looking like work done with power. Like work done from 04 to 06, but with power. So if Coleman is like a way better version of TJ Duckett, everybody will be happy.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's obviously Freeman's job. If assuming he keeps playing like this, and there's no really chance for him to lose it. But as I've said before, I do think they're not going to sort of be like, oh, he's entrenched in the position. If we get as we get in like November or whatever. If there's a couple of games where Freeman just has 13 carries for 45 yards, and meanwhile Tevin Coleman's getting 8 or 9 carries for 50-something yards or 60-something yards and showing that explosiveness, I think they won't hesitate to sort of say, okay, well Coleman's out playing Freeman, and he has a job. But that's not the case right now, and I don't think the Falcons, because Freeman's playing so well, I don't think the Falcons are going to give Coleman a ton of carries, until his ribs are fully healthy, and I think they can afford to do that because of how well Freeman is playing. So right now it's Freeman's job, and assuming there is no drop off on his play, then it's going to remain his job.
I mean, it'd have to really drop off. Really drop off.
Well, yeah, from where it is right now, because right now, you can make a case as a top 5 running back. So, yeah,
the last 3 games, he's been the best running back in the league.
Yeah,
like you can't even honestly can't even question that, because over the last 3 weeks, he's put up the most yards, both rushing and receiving, and the most touchdowns out of any running back in the NFL. And like one big play, 120-yard run. That's how crazy it's been. He only has one run that's gone for 20 yards or more.
All right, our next question comes from Dirty Birds. He asks, what's your take on Matt Ryan's most explosive fourth quarter run of his career after playing such a subpar game?
I think that hit knocked the sense back into him. Because I feel like after that, he was just money on the last 3 passes he threw that game. Zip right to Freeman, zip right into Roddy's hands. Right after that run, like that was beautiful. That he needed to have someone knock some sense into him. And if it had to be himself running into a 5'10" safety, then more power to it. Because he just played like crap. Hopefully that's his like turnover prone game of the year. He always has 1 or 2 where he's throwing just a shit ton of interceptions and fumbles the ball and just does stupid shit like run into a safety on a run like that. Hopefully this week it's like, oh, he threw for 4 touchdowns and 500 yards and said, fuck you, Saints. That would be perfect. And then Freeman also runs for 150 because, it's the mom.
Yeah. Yeah, we see Matt Ryan's half of this scrambling. He had with the 18-yard run a couple of weeks ago. So, I loved it. I loved that run. Him lowering the shoulder and saying, get off me, dude. So I thought, great. Play more like that, Matt Ryan. I can have fun with that, even if you are turning the ball over. All right, we have another one from Dirty Birds. If Matt Bryant doesn't miss those 2 field goals, do you believe the Falcons could have pulled away instead of going in overtime?
Yes. Yeah, the completely different game if he hits even that first field goal. Because I think that first field goal was going to make it, 7-3? And then, Atlanta was stopping them. They really weren't doing anything against the Falcons on defense. But that missed field goal happened right at the half. That would have been 3 points there to make it 7-6. The second missed field goal was coming back in after the half. It would have been 9-7 going into a drive where the Redskins got 27 yards. They would have gotten the same 27 yards starting at their 20 instead of at their own 38. So it would have been a punt situation, and the Falcons would have had so much more momentum that maybe instead of the missed field goal, the Falcons would have gotten a touchdown on the next drive. Or instead of a field goal, they would have gotten a touchdown. They just kept forcing punts until late in the game. So I think the Falcons would have ran away with it a lot faster, would have actually run away with the game had they not missed those field goals, because it changes the game so much just to score some points. And just to put the pressure of, oh, hey, we may not have been able to score any touchdowns in the first 40 minutes or first 35 minutes of the game, but we're still beating you 9-7. And now you've got to get through our defense, which you've only done once all game. Let's try it.
Yeah, I agree. I can't really add anything to that. I think, those field goals definitely hurt us, especially, the overtime and whatnot. I think the game is definitely over.
The Falcons only punted once all game.
All right. Evan Birchfield asks, Stupar seems to be getting more and more playing time. I like him. Do you all?
Does Aaron like his cousin? Of course he does. I mean, shit. Nate Stupar is like Aaron's adopted cousin.
Stup life.
He has impressed me. He has been excellent in the time that he's been playing. He's been basically what I thought Bierman was going to be, as an edge-setting, strong side linebacker. And I'm glad that Bierman wasn't what I thought he was going to be, because Stupar deserves to be where he's at. And he's got the athleticism to play weak side linebacker in future games, so I can't wait to see if they actually put him in there. Towards the end of the game, or from the middle of the game on, they were putting him in at weak side linebacker over Bartu, because Bartu looked horrible the first half. So I think he's going to end up being the starter at weak side linebacker until they finally figure everything out.
Yeah, I've been on the Stupar bandwagon since we first picked him up. And, I think that the interesting thing was I don't think he played particularly well this preseason. I think that's another instance of, preseason not mattering, because I would probably say he was probably our weakest linebacker of the guys that are currently on the roster. Alan Bradford and Joplin Bartu and those guys, to the point that I didn't think he was a safe bet to make the team by year's end. And as I said, I was probably Stupar's biggest supporter for over a year. But, he's played outstanding in the regular season. Another example of that, of guys sort of still feeling their way through the defense and the scheme in the summer, but then things starting to click for them in the regular season. And, I think he's going to continue to keep playing at this level. And, the beautiful thing about Stupar is the one thing he did do this preseason was he played all three linebacker positions. So he's really kind of the top backup, or should be at least, for all three spots. And gives his team a lot of versatility if injuries continue to, limit some guys at that spot, like Reed and Durant so far this year. All right. Next question comes from @DirtyBirdWilson. Do you think we will sign a free agent pass rusher to help improve our pressure up front? If so, who?
Do you know what's going to improve the pressure up front? Playing offensive lines that aren't 3 of the 5 best in the NFL. That's going to improve the pressure up front. Going against the Saints, the Buccaneers, the Titans, the 49ers, that's going to really help the pressure up front. The Falcons have been getting pressure. The issue is what the Falcons have been doing with it. They've been knocking balls away. They've been intercepting passes. They haven't really been getting the sacks that we want. But if you force a quarterback to make a stupid throw, like what Kirk Cousins did at the end of the game last night or on Sunday, would that not be the better version of pressure? Forcing a guy into a bad throw to a receiver that's falling down on his route because he doesn't want to get hit by Nate Stupar on a blitz. I mean, personally, I would much rather have that kind of pressure than the kind of pressure of, oh, hey, we're just hitting the quarterback, and, oh, hey, he's completing the pass every time. The pressure is much better this year.
Do I think we'll sign a free agent pass rusher now? No. I think the Cardinals just signed the guy that I was talking about back in June that we might want to pick up, Dwight Freeney. So I don't really think there's anybody else out there that you would sign and be like, oh, yeah, let's bring him in and see what he can do. Unless, they want to bring back John Abraham. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I think his career is probably over due to the concussions. if you're talking about do we think we will sign a free agent pass rusher next year, I think, yeah. And in 2016, that's certainly a possibility. I don't know who they would sign, but, they'd probably be more likely to draft a guy than spend money on a guy. But, yeah, I think I've been a little more critical of the pass rush than Scott has, but I don't feel like it's to the point where we need to go out and feel like we need to make a major upgrade there. I feel like it's just fine. It just hasn't really come into its own yet. All right, we got one from Scott Emmanuel. He asks, how many times are we picking off Breeze and how many times do we sack him? And who gets them?
Hopefully they pick off Breeze 2 or 3 times. Hopefully it's Trufant gets one, Alford gets one, and I don't know, we'll throw one into Aaron's boy Stupar. And then sacks, I'm going to go Beasley gets 2, hopefully. Claiborne gets 1. Schofield gets 1. Bino gets 1. Hageman gets 3. Just because Evans can't handle Hageman. I would love to see it that way. Get like 8 sacks on Breeze. Like I said, I want to see Breeze get hit so much that he's popping up like Rocky, like, hey, where the ball to? Now, I'm not endorsing a bounty of any sorts.
Okay.
But I just want to see Breeze get his shit rocked.
Okay.
Because I'm tired of seeing Breeze throw for 500 yards on the Falcons pretty much every time.
Okay.
I want to see him get hit so many times that they want to pull him out, but they're like, nah, he's fine. He's just in pain.
Yeah, okay. All right. I'm going to say 1 interception. I feel like Ricardo Allen's going to snatch one because I think Breeze is going to force one down the field like he kind of did the last time we got those 5 interceptions against him. And Ricardo in center field will get his 2nd interception of the year. I'm going to say I think we probably get a bunch of hits, but I'll say we probably get 3 sacks. And I'll say 1 for Claiborne, 1 for Beasley. And let's go with 1 for Schofield.
That works for me.
And 3 hits for Babineau. He won't get the sacks, but he'll get a bunch of hits. And a bunch more from other guys. Too many to count. All right. Evan Birchfield asks, any matchups you're looking forward to seeing versus the Saints?
I'm excited to see what Tammy does against their defense. I think it's a very poorly coordinated defense. I don't think they do very well with coverage with their linebackers. And I think if you have Tammy going against Kakaha on some routes, you could get a lot of yards.
I'm looking forward to Ryan Schrader versus Cameron Jordan. I think Jordan is really the only good pass rusher they have. I thought Schrader did an excellent job against him, Week 16 last year, which was a big improvement from all the other games where Cameron Jordan destroyed Lamar Holmes or insert Falcons right tackle, whoever. So I want to see if that, if Schrader can keep that up. I've been a little bit probably more critical of Schrader this year than probably most, just because I want to see him play at a high level, continue to play at a high level, and sort of shake some of the inconsistencies that he's shown a little bit. But, I think this week would be a good opportunity for him to sort of own Cameron Jordan and make that guy look like an overpaid chump on Thursday night. So I'd like to see that. Score prediction from Evan Birchfield. Scott, you already gave yours. Do you want to change it?
Nah, 35-28 feels right. I can't predict more than a 1-score victory in any game. I feel like the Falcons are very, very good this year, though, and they deserve to keep winning. And I want to see them beat the Saints. But the fact that it's in New Orleans, I'm not gonna be like, oh, they're gonna destroy them, because if I ever say that, then the Falcons lose 50 to fucking nothing. So, in honor of not jinxing the team, I think the Falcons win, but I think it's only by a touchdown.
There you go. Yeah, I think that it might have played something into it. Like I was saying, oh, we'll probably blow out the Texans, but I won't say that we'll blow out the Texans. And like, oh, we probably won't blow out the Redskins, but I'll say that we'll blow out the Redskins, and the games are too reverse. So I'm going to go with 24-17 Falcons. I do think this is going to be more of a run-oriented, defensive-minded game because I really don't expect Julio to be overly effective. I do think there's probably 50-50 if he plays. And without having that sort of explosive stretch receiver on the field, I feel like the Falcons aren't going to be able to generate as many big plays as they usually have earlier in the season. And we saw last week they only had 2 plays of 20 or more yards, and it was one of their lower scoring efforts until that pick six. And they got 14 points off of turnovers. So the offense really only generated 11 points. So I do think because of that, I feel like we'll see some of that, but I do feel like we can win a game where it's just, pounding the rock and playing good defense against this Saints team. But because of that, the final score will look closer than the actual game was. Okay, we got one from the unknown tweeter. He asks, is there any info on Durant's elbow? Are they saying what happened?
All we know is he missed this half of the Texas with an elbow injury. He missed this past week with an elbow injury. He's probably going to miss the Thursday game with an elbow injury. So, I mean, yeah, basically, I don't know what's going on with it, but it can't be good.
Yeah, I remember watching the play where it happened in the Texans game, and I don't remember exactly if someone landed on it. And he played one more snap, tried to play one more snap on it, and it was very clear that he couldn't. So he left the field after. I think he only ended up playing 7 plays. So it happened pretty early in that game. Yeah, like Scott says, I don't really have any additional info on it. He didn't practice today. That's usually not a good sign that you're going to play on Thursday if you're not practicing on Tuesday. So, I guess the hope is, the extra days of rest will get him ready to play against the Titans. And I guess that's what we'll hope for. And if he doesn't play, then I don't feel like the Falcons, sort of what we talked about in recent shows with Brooks Reed, I don't feel like the Falcons are going to be pushing him to come back early just because he has an injury history similar to Brooks Reed with that groin injury. So I don't feel like, he missed last year with a biceps injury. So I feel like the Falcons will bring him back at his own pace and won't rush him. And if that means next week, great. If that means the Bucks or the 49er game, great. If that means he misses a month, not so great. But if that's what it takes to get him healthy for the whole season and finish off the season, then take it. We'll do what we can do because Stupar can step up and fill the shoes, I think.
Health in the playoffs is more important than health halfway through the year.
Pretty much.
Especially once you've already started 5-0 and it's looking like playoffs are a near certainty. Unless something crazy happens. You do start worrying about playoffs and long-term runs at this point when you're 5-0. If the Falcons were 3-2, I'd say get them back as soon as possible, but they're 5-0. You can afford to lose a game or two if, Justin Durant doesn't play and Julio Jones doesn't play. The Falcons could afford to lose this game, but no one wants to see him lose it. And I also think this would be an ideal week to sit Julio Jones because somebody's going to step up. It's the Saints. Somebody is going to go, man, fuck those guys. Let's beat the shit out of them. Somebody. Because Roddy's been in their ear all week going, man, I hate these motherfuckers. And when you're in that wide receiver group, that's why Roddy's here. Let's be honest. Roddy now is Joe Horn 2007. He's an ineffective receiver, but he's the leader of that group. And he'll probably put up more yards than Joe Horn did. But that's still not saying much because I think Joe Horn put up like
it's pretty pathetic. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. It's pretty pathetic.
it was like I want to say it was like 30 catches for 250 yards or something like that. Roddy's already on pace for more than that. Like he's on pace for almost the same. 26 catches, 368. But like maybe Roddy goes off for 100 yards because it's the Saints. Maybe this is one of his like 2 good games all year, and both of them were Saints games. And then every other game he gets like 2 catches for 35 yards.
Let's hope so.
I mean, that's all you really need from him right now. But that's what he is. He's 2007 Joe Horn. He's the leader. He's the guy who had his career, had his numbers, still a great player in historical aspects, but at this point, he's just not what he could be. So you don't even worry about it. It's not a big deal if he's not the best player right now. And then you just have Hankerson and Hardy and Weems and Nick Williams get the ball. You kind of don't have a big target at that point, but what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the thing that happens to all these receivers. I can think of some recent examples with Hines Ward, Reggie Wayne, Donald Driver. And the interesting thing in all those cases where you started to see young guys emerge when those old guys really just didn't have much in the tank. Indianapolis, T.Y. Hilton. Pittsburgh, it was Antonio Brown. Green Bay was Randall Cobb. And so now we're in a situation where I think Roddy is at that point where, he's really just playing for no real, he's not really giving you a whole lot on a snap-to-snap basis. You get a couple nice plays here and there. But, I think, we're looking to see if a guy like Hankerson or a guy like Hardy, because, Hankerson's a veteran, but he's still, only 4 or 5 years into his career, so he's still like 27. So he's still a relatively young guy, and obviously Hardy is an up-and-comer. So I'm hoping that we can sort of see some of these guys emerge over these next 11 games and really sort of give us a solid foundation for the future, to have complementary guys around Julio that can, be reliable options for Matt Ryan as we move forward. But, guys, that is our show for tonight. We will be back next week to talk about the Saints game. The Saints win, right? You can hit up the show if you want to ask a question to have us answer on the mailbag section. Use the hashtag Falcons mailbag. You can hit up the show's Twitter account at FalconsPFC. I am at FalcFans. Scott is at Karasik PFS. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Head over to ProFootballCentral.com and check us out there. And that's our show this week, guys. Great stuff.